Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're wrestling with one of the most agonizing questions in all of medicine, really. It's fueled by a surge of highly visible but also highly contested claims of a breakthrough.
And this whole deep dive is actually anchored by a question from one of you, a listener, who just summed up the dilemma perfectly.
He did. He said, if I were losing my mind to Alzheimer's, I'd take a shot at the new Chinese neck surgery. What do I have to lose so it kills me? I'm losing my mind already. The YouTube videos have convinced me. Am I wrong? I can't wait for a 10-year double-blind study.
And that sentiment, that raw despair, is exactly what's driving this whole story.
It is. Alzheimer's is just relentless. It's the leading cause of dementia, a chronic brain disorder that, slowly strips away everything, memory, thinking skills, and ultimately your independence.
It's irreversible, and at the moment, it's terminal. It is the ultimate diagnosis of hopelessness, which is why any flicker of potential relief it goes viral instantly.
Exactly. So our mission today is to take a hard, objective look at that flicker, this deep cervical lymphatic venous anastomosis, or DCLVA surgery.
We're going to unpack the incredible promise, the cautious reality of the medical science, the sudden government ban, and the incredibly complex ethics around it all.
That tension, between the scientific rigor we need and that understandable human urgency, that's what's so central here.
It is.
So let's start with the mechanism.
Yeah.
Because the theory behind this procedure is, I have to say, genuinely exciting. It was first performed in China back in 2021 by a microsurgery expert in Hangzhou.
Correct. And the idea really stems from a revolution in how we understand the brain. For centuries, we thought Alzheimer's was just about the buildup of these harmful proteins.
The amyloid plaques and the tau tangles, right?
The very same. They build up and essentially just choke the brain's functioning. And for just as long, we thought the brain was, sealed off with no real waste disposal system like the rest of our body has.
But that's not true anymore, is it? We found the brain's plumbing system.
We have. It's called the glymphatic system. Think of it as the brain's specialized waste clearance pathway. It pushes out all the metabolic junk, including those nasty amyloid and tau proteins, out of the brain tissue and into these drainage channels that lead, eventually, to the deep cervical lymph nodes right there in the neck.
So if the brain is constantly pumping waste to the neck, and Alzheimer's is a waste buildup disease, the surgery's logic is to, fix a traffic jam at the exit ramp.
That is a perfect analogy. The surgery, which is a type of lymphatic venous anastomosis, or LVA, tries to bypass that bottleneck.
How? What do they actually do?
They connect the patient's tiny lymphatic vessels directly to a major vein in the neck.
And we really need to emphasize just how tiny we're talking about here.
It is jaw-droppingly precise. The vessels they are joining are often only 0.1 to 0.3 millimeters in diameter.
Wow. That's thinner than a few strands of hair.
Exactly. The goal is to create a shunt, to speed up the flow and drainage of that lymph fluid, essentially unclogging the cerebral lymphatic systems.
And with a theory that brilliant and that kind of technical skill, the anecdotal reports that came out were, they were magnetic.
There were.
There's that famous case, the 78-year-old patient in Xi'an with severe AD who just 1 week after the surgery showed this dramatic improvement.
She recognized her family again, her emotional stability came back, her sleep cycle normalized.
For families watching a loved one just disappear, that sounds like an absolute miracle.
They are profound qualitative improvements. But what really made the appeal irresistible was, the market context.
The cost.
The cost. Look at the economics here. This surgery was being offered for less than $3,000.
Okay.
Now, compare that to the new pharmaceutical therapies approved in the West, which can run upwards of $26,500 a year.
Per year?
Per year. Not including infusion costs. That cost difference is, it explains the explosion of interest.
It's the difference between buying a high-end bicycle and buying a luxury car every single year. You can see how the excitement just became contagious.
Especially when you add social media. We saw Chinese doctors promoting this enthusiastically, making claims like it was effective for 60 to 80% of patients.
That kind of message, plus a cheap, fast solution, it meant patients and their families just flocked to it.
At breakneck speed.
And the speed is what is so stunning here.
Right.
The first case was in 2021. What did the scale look like just a few years later?
It's fascinating, really, how fast this became institutionalized without any real regulatory clearance. By June of 2025, just 4 years later, this surgery was estimated to have been done in 382 hospitals.
382.
Covering almost every single province in China It went from one innovative surgery to a national phenomenon,
And that kind of rapid adoption was bound to catch the eye of the regulators.
inevitably.
Yeah.
And then the hammer dropped.
Swiftly.
It did. In July 2025, China's National Health Commission basically told local authorities to halt all LVA surgery for Alzheimer's immediately.
The medical establishment pulled the emergency brake.
They did.
So why? Why ban it? If the anecdotes were so great and the cost was so low, what was the official reasoning? It sounds almost like old school caution.
It was, and it aligns with principles of evidence-based medicine that are respected everywhere. The government listed a whole catalog of scientific deficiencies. First, a critical lack of evidence from preclinical studies.
Meaning they hadn't even proven it worked on animals in the lab before scaling it up across hundreds of hospitals.
You can't skip the lab work exactly. They stressed the procedure was still at an early stage of clinical research. They also said the indications, who might benefit, and the contraindications, who might be harmed, were not clear at all.
And finally, the bottom line.
The ultimate bottom line.
Yeah.
Insufficient medical or economic evidence that it was safe, effective, or cost-effective. It was just too fast, too unproven, and potentially too dangerous to continue.
And this wasn't just coming from the government, right? There was skepticism within the medical community before the ban.
Oh yes, some experts were questioning the fundamental mechanism, the long-term effectiveness. They noted that these claimed improvements were almost always qualitative, based on what a family member saw, and not on accepted objective evaluation systems.
Which brings us right back to our listeners' desperate question. I can't wait for a 10-year double-blind study. Given the hype, why can't we trust those initial results? What's the actual evidence we have right now?
Because the current clinical evidence is what we call very low level. If we use the standard scale, the Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine levels, these studies are mostly at level 4 or 5.
Can you translate that for us? What does level 4 or 5 mean in terms of reliability?
In plain English, it means all we have are case reports and exploratory studies. We have anecdotes and small observations, not reliable proof.
So, stories, not science.
Essentially, for a chronic disease like Alzheimer's, the problems with that are critical.
Yeah.
Most studies had tiny sample sizes, often 7 cases or fewer.
7 patients isn't a trial, that's an observation.
Precisely. And the follow-up time was completely inadequate. The longest one reported was only 6 months. Alzheimer's is a disease you measure in decades, not months.
Right.
But the biggest scientific issue is that none of these initial studies use randomized controlled designs, or blinding, which means we have no way to rule out the massive influence of the placebo effect.
Or just bias from caregivers and doctors who are so desperate for it to work.
Exactly. And let's not forget the technical side. This isn't simple plumbing, operating on vessels thinner than hair. The risk of a poor technical outcome is huge. It demands super microsurgical skills that very few surgeons truly have.
And the data that does exist is mixed, isn't it? It contradicts those social media claims of 60 to 80% effectiveness.
It does. We found one recent study that showed no significant cognitive improvement at all after 1 month.
Wait, none? How did they measure that?
They used the standardized cognitive tests that doctors rely on, like the MMSE and the MoCA. These give you a hard number for memory and thinking. In that study, the scores improved 0 points.
So functionally, the patient's thinking skills were the same as before the surgery.
In the short term, yes.
That is a huge point that needs to be heard. You can clear the protein, but not restore the function. If the brain scans look better, but the person still can't recognize their family, what good is the surgery?
This is the absolute crux of the scientific caution. Once amyloid and tau have damaged that brain tissue, that damage is done. The brain is not known for regenerating lost function on that scale.
So while clearing the drain might stop future damage.
It might, but it doesn't rewind the clock on the damage that's already there.
That's a vital distinction. It shifts the whole conversation from cure to maybe stasis. What about the physical risks?
Well, the initial reported risks were relatively manageable, things like transient delirium, probably from the anesthesia in one group, some temporary trouble raising an arm.
Okay.
But the real long-term safety profile of redirecting the brain's waste into the bloodstream for years, we simply don't know.
And that uncertainty is why you need rigorous science. I know researchers are trying to fix this gap, right? There's a proper trial now.
There is. They launched the CleanAD randomized controlled trial in China in February 2025. That is the necessary next step to standardize everything and establish real efficacy and safety profiles.
That trial is the only way to genuinely answer the listener's question, not with anecdotes, but with data.
Right. But even while we wait, we have to address the heart of this, the ethical crossroads, and the emotional power of that statement. What do I have to lose? So it kills me. I'm losing my mind already.
We have to acknowledge that that statement reflects the immense crushing suffering that Alzheimer's causes. The desperation is real because the consequences are just devastating.
The toll is financial and physical. Studies show that people diagnosed with dementia see their out-of-pocket healthcare spending more than double. Their net worth can decline by over 60% within 8 years.
This disease doesn't just destroy memory, it destroys a family's financial security.
And the care burden. It's astronomical. The amount of care from family and friends triples. People with dementia need an average of 45 hours a month of unpaid, exhausting care.
And that's not for a few months, it's sustained for years. When a loved one is thinking about an experimental surgery, it's often because the current situation is just unsustainable.
And when you look at the DCLVA surgery through that lens, you run into this severe ethical dilemma of what we call non-restorative therapies.
That's that disconnect we were talking about. Clearing the protein but not actually restoring the person? If a patient is already severely impaired and the surgery only halts the physical progression, what's the true outcome?
That is the critical ethical discussion that families and doctors have to have openly and honestly. If the intervention stops the pathology but doesn't bring back the person you remember, it risks just perpetuating a state of severe cognitive disability.
You could be adding years to a patient's life, but without significant quality of life.
Exactly. While simultaneously increasing the emotional and financial burden on caregivers, maybe indefinitely.
The idea of a cure, for most people, means restoration. It means getting their loved one back. But if the best that science can achieve is just halting the clock, the decision becomes unbelievably complex.
It forces us to confront the true meaning of benefit versus burden. And we also have to be very clear about the idea of control. The listener asks, what do I have to lose? So it kills me.
Right.
It is essential to distinguish taking a chance on an unproven surgery from the legal and ethical processes we already have for ending suffering.
You mean things like refusing or withdrawing aggressive treatment like tube feeding or CPR?
Yes. That is not assisted suicide. It's letting the underlying irreversible disease take its natural course. It's about ensuring comfort and dignity, usually guided by legal advance directives, like a living will.
It's an established option that's very different from the uncertainty of a radical experimental surgery.
So, in summary, this Chinese neck surgery for Alzheimer's offers a beautiful scientific hypothesis that fixing the brain's waste clearance can help. But that hypothesis right now is only supported by level 4 and 5 evidence.
Anecdotes and exploratory study.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the regulatory ban was necessary because the rapid, widespread adoption just bypassed all the essential steps that are there to protect patients.
To protect them from a procedure that is not only technically demanding, but could be useless for restoring their quality of life.
We need rigorous ethical science to temper that desperate hope. We have to avoid past medical mistakes, like the brain lobotomy, which was hailed as a miracle before its irreversible harm became clear.
The desire for a cure is powerful, but only robust evidence can ensure that hope doesn't turn into exploitation.
Which brings us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with today.
The dilemma of this LVA surgery forces us to confront a fundamental ethical question in neurodegenerative care. If a new medical intervention can successfully halt the physical progression of a terminal disease but cannot restore the function that's already been lost, who, the patient, the family, the doctor, or the state, should bear the ultimate responsibility for deciding whether that prolonged stasis represents a benefit or merely a prolonged suffering?